Here are some of the stories we're following today. Scammers launch a fake COVID-19 contact tracing app. A former Supreme Court judge says Canada should discontinue court proceedings against a Huawei executive. Travel restrictions in Atlantic Canada have been eased, and Ontario wants to make sure temporary farm workers are tested for COVID-19. Well, you know, it seems scammers never sleep. Their latest target? Canada's COVID-19 tracing app. You know, that app isn't even out yet, and they're scamming people. You recall last week, Prime Minister Trudeau announced a nationwide tracing app, and he encouraged people, when it was available, to download it on their smartphones. But the app hasn't even been rolled out yet. Actually, they don't expect it to be around until next month, and even then, available only for testing in Ontario. Did that stop the hackers? Not on your life. They've been busy. ESET, they're a cybersecurity company in Slovakia. ESET says 2 fake websites that look like official Canadian government sites have been advertising a COVID-19 tracing app. And they're saying this is endorsed by Health Canada. So, you know, people look at it and they figure, why not? I mean, it looks like a government website. Well, these bogus sites, they've been taken down now. Unfortunately, what people downloaded contained some computer ransomware. You know what ransomware is? You got to pay to get the use of your device back. But this ransomware is known as Crycryptor. It was embedded in the fake app. And what it does is it gets into your phone, gets into all of your personal files on your phone, and it encrypts them. Now you haven't got any access to them. Well, how do you get access? Well, there's a message also that is sent to you. You're told to email the attacker where you can discuss recovery. You know what that means. You're going to be paying for it. So be careful what you download. And like I said, for any of our Canadian listeners or any of you who might be talking to people in Canada, those 2 websites have been taken down. But beware, the official app hasn't been released yet. So anybody who says they got one, they don't. A former Supreme Court judge in Canada says the Canadian government has the authority to halt the extradition of a Huawei executive. Louise Arbour says the government should do that as part of the efforts to secure the release of the 2 Michaels. You recall they're the 2 Canadian men who've been detained in China. Former diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spavor have been in custody almost a year and a half. They were arrested in Beijing back in December of 2018, and their arrest came just days after Meng Wanzhou was taken off a plane in Vancouver and arrested on an American warrant, that warrant alleging that she sold technology to Iran, which breached American sanctions. So the Americans want us to extradite her back to the States where they can take court action. We're kind of caught in the middle of this. And this Supreme Court judge is saying, no, this is not our problem. It's China's problem. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has rejected proposals that this whole thing be dropped in exchange for the repatriation of the 2 Canadians. He's saying, no, the judiciary has to be independent. But again, Arbour stresses the allegations against Meng are an American problem, not Canada's. We should just stay out of it. The 4 Atlantic provinces in eastern Canada, well, they've opened up their borders to each other now. Interprovincial travel is now being allowed between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. These 4 provinces had the lowest outbreaks of COVID-19 in the country. Now, part of their success can be attributed to their move to close the borders to outsiders very early in the game. And even people from neighboring provinces, they were treated like they came from a foreign country. They had to quarantine, they had to self-quarantine for 14 days. So that essentially kept everybody out of the province, kept the virus from coming into the province. Unlike visitors from other parts of Canada, people living in those 4 provinces now can travel back and forth across the boundaries. They don't have to self-isolate. The province hopes that easing the restrictions will boost tourism because their tourism has been hard hit. People can't come there, of course. They hope some of those losses will be offset. Public health officials, though, remaining cautious. They still warn, COVID-19 remains a threat. Just because the restrictions are lifted doesn't mean the virus went away. Now, in my province, Alberta, our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, well, she's still advising us don't travel too far.
No change to our official recommendation, which is that non-essential travel outside of Alberta should be avoided at this time. Again, that's something that we continue to have conversations with our partners in other provinces about, but that's our current recommendation.
So I guess we'll be sticking pretty close to home this summer. But, there's a whole lot of things to do here in Alberta, all kinds of sights to see. So we'll be traveling Alberta. Alberta is also investing $10 million in a different type of testing for COVID-19. The government wants serology tests to be done. So what's this different about this type of testing? What is it all about? How does it differ from swab testing? We're currently swab testing people. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro says the two tests measure different things. He says the swab test will indicate if a person currently has the infection. You can tell if they're infected from the results of the swab test. Now, Shandro says a serology test, well, it's looking at the past.
We know that there are people who've been infected and were never tested. Many of them simply because they never got sick. And that's where serology testing comes in. It detects the presence of antibodies in a person's blood, which can show us if they've been exposed to COVID-19 in the past. And that shows us more about how the virus is spreading and how best to contain it. Serology testing is a big step forward, but we also need to be clear about what it doesn't do. It does not, and I repeat not, replace swab testing.
Now, this testing will be done in 4 voluntary health studies, 2 of them involving children, 2 with adults. We haven't looked at the numbers across Canada for a few days. Almost 102,000 cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began. Well over 8,400 people have died. Most of them were seniors in nursing homes. About 65,000 people have recovered so far. In Ontario, the provincial government has expanded coronavirus testing on farms in southern parts of the province. Mobile testing units are being sent out to the farms, and these farms, are employing thousands of temporary workers. An outbreak on several farms earlier this month prompted Mexico to ban people from coming to Canada for seasonal work. 3 Mexican nationals died of COVID-19. Mexican government was critical of the lack of safety procedures, and days later, after they banned people, days later, they reversed that decision after Canada made some commitments to beef up safety and improve living conditions. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says workers should not fear the consequences if they test positive.
Send a clear message to the temporary workers. No one will lose their job if you have COVID-19. No one will be sent home if you have COVID-19. And if you test positive for COVID-19 and you need to self-isolate for 14 days, you will be eligible for WSIB benefits. And in some cases, if you worked here last year and you have a social insurance number, workers may be eligible for the federal CERB benefits.
Ford says in some circumstances, new public health guidelines will allow some workers who've been tested positive to actually continue working.
I also understand that our farmers are often on the seasonal schedule, and this is one of their busiest times of the year. They need the extra help, and unlike other professions, most of it is outdoors and isolated. So to further support our farmers, the third pillar of our plan is a new public health guidance for asymptomatic workers. This guidance was developed in consultation with Dr. Williams and his team of experts. This new protocol will give farmers guidance on isolating workers who have tested positive for COVID-19, but who have no symptoms and who can still safely work outdoors in isolation.